following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Oshkosh Diaries. I'm Paul Esslinger, joined once again by co-host Derek Kloiber. In the last show, we were very fortunate enough to have Clarence Inky Jungwirth talk to us about his childhood and about the Bloody Sixth Ward in Oshkosh. And we're fortunate enough again to have Inky back. And we're going to revisit the Bloody Sixth for a little bit. And then we're going to talk about Inky's service in World War II in the military. And then we're going to move on to the Oshkosh Corporation, or better known as Oshkosh Truck. So with that, Inky, thank you very much for coming back and talking to us again.
Glad to be here.
Okay. Last show, Inky, we were talking about the Bloody Sixth.
Yep.
Learned a lot of things there, names and nicknames and stuff like that. One of the things that you have in one of the chapters in your book are politicians, and I know a little bit about some of the politicians in Oshkosh, some of the good ones and the bad ones. I'm not going to say where I'm at on that, but years ago, politics was huge in Oshkosh. Would you agree?
Right. That's right. In the city of Oshkosh, there was a lot of Democratic people, and they belonged to the Democrat. They voted Democratic because they were Catholic, and they were laborers. And in the past, the Democratic Party was viewed by many citizens of Oshkosh as being in favor of labor. And much in it. So that was, and in fact, the tavern next door to me, called Sheeny Steckbar's Tavern, it was a sort of a Democratic headquarters, and the people during the early years in the 20th century, it was sort of the headquarters of the Sixth Ward of the Democratic Party, and they'd have meetings inside the tavern. They would talk politics. Politics was discussed frequently in the taverns of Oshkosh, and especially in the Sheeny Steckbar's Tavern, because he was a Democrat, and he had been on the Winnebago County Board at one time in the history in him. And talking about politics in the early part of the 20th, in the middle of, say, the 1930s and 1940s, one of the most popular politicians in the city of Oshkosh was George Oakes. And
we have some pictures of him up on the screen.
Yep, he was mayor of the city. Initially he was in charge of parks. And one of the things that George Oakes did as being park superintendent, maintaining the parks, is I talked to his boy about this to verify it. And George Oakes was in favor of enlarging the parks, especially the South Park and the North Park. It was the Menominee Park that he concentrated on. And one thing he is noted about in the developing of Menominee Park was he wanted to enlarge the park. And George Oakes had antagonized the business community in Oshkosh to a large extent by his outspokenness and by his ability to get things done. And it got to be so bad that the business people in Oshkosh didn't like the way George Oakes operated. And to illustrate it, that somebody in the at the council at the time, it was either aldermanic or common council, I don't remember which, I think it was aldermanic at the time.
Yeah.
It was aldermanic at the time. Somehow they restricted the amount of money he could spend at one time on the park system. And he wanted to enlarge Menominee Park and fill in by the bay to the
Miller's Bay?
Miller's Bay. He wanted to fill in Miller's Bay to enlarge the park. And what he had to do, that he wanted to fill it in, and the council, or the automatic form of government at the time, voted to limit his expenditures to $500 per project. So to bypass that restriction, he negotiated with a company to haul dirt into Menominee Park at $499. That's how he bypassed, and that's how Miller Bay got filled in, because he could spend $499. And in those days, for $499, you could have a lot of work done, because labor was cheap at the time, and that's how Miller Bay got filled in, and George Oakes did it. And George Oakes eventually became mayor of the city of Oshkosh. But the people on the south side, he lived in the 6th Ward, and he was well liked, although I believe he was Republican in his political philosophy, but he was also, it didn't seem to bother him that he was living in the Democratic ward, and he listened to the Democrats in the ward, and he was well liked by the Catholic 6 warders, because he did it. Now at that time of the aldermanic system in Oshkosh, there were 2 aldermen per ward. You got 16 wards in the city by the time George Oakes got into the politics. And so there were 32 aldermen in the aldermanic system. And with 32 aldermen, there was a lot of hostility amongst the aldermen between the wards, because everybody their aldermen from the wards wanted to favor their ward. Mm-hmm. So the 6th Ward alderman was, I think it was Isle Steckbar thing. And at Steckbar's Tavern, we would sit in and discuss politics. Even as teenagers, we could sit in the tavern. And then when George Oakes ran the park system, like I mentioned, they limited him to $499 per project that he did. And the Oshkosh Northwestern came, when he became mayor of the city of Oshkosh, he had antagonized the business people in Oshkosh. And I verified this with his kid. And I think it's George Oakes Jr. And he mentioned that the business people began to hate George because of his policies and his favoring of the working people. And many of the businessmen people in Oshkosh were Republican. And this is not to denigrate anybody Republican, but at that particular time in the 1930s, that the Republican Party was looked on as being unsympathetic to the laboring man.
Sure.
That was the politics of the time. And of course, it's not true today, but it was true back in the 1930s and 1920s during the Great Depression. It so happened that George had antagonized the business people in Oshkosh by his policies. And he had antagonized the people that ran the Oshkosh Northwestern. And when he became mayor, the people that run the Oshkosh Daily Northwestern, when he ran in the office of mayor, and when they printed the minutes of the minute in the paper, they would not say Mayor George Oakes. They would say Mayor did such and such and such. They wouldn't even mention his name.
Wow.
They would antagonize him. And his kid told me that George had antagonized so many people that that's the reason the newspaper wouldn't print his name. And they just didn't. And I understand that the people that ran the Northwestern didn't have any use for him either, and because of his policies. And when he became mayor, he had a fishing pole in his office, And somebody asked him, I think the fishing pole was around 10 foot long, and asked him why. Somebody asked him why he had the fishing pole, and he said, I have that in there because that's for people I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. And George Oakes really did a lot for the community. He was really a progressive mayor. He served during World War II in the 1930s and early 1940s. And he was revered by even by the Democrats, even though they suspected that his leanings were more Republican than Democratic. Back in the 1930s, under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he came president I believe he was elected in 1934.
Yeah, I think so.
Franklin Roosevelt, Democratic president, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, being a strong Democratic person and the leader of the Democratic Party back in the late 30s and early 40s during World War II, was a very popular president. And you got to remember that in the 1930s and the early 1940s, this was the height of the Great Depression that started in 1929. The unemployment rate in the city of Oshkosh in the 1930s, according to my investigation, was about 75%.
Oh my God.
The lumber mill workers, my dad worked at Payne Lumber Company, and during the Great Depression started in 1929 with the fall of the stock market, the Great Depression. The people today don't realize what the unemployment rate, being as large as it was in Oshkosh, what it did to the people of Oshkosh to enable them to survive. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt started the WPA, Works Progress Administration, and all the other things to help. What he wanted to do is give the people some money back to work.
Right.
And George Oakes supported that policy in the city of Oshkosh. To give you an example of what George Oakes did, when he was mayor, when we got snow like today, during the snowstorms, when the snowplow drivers went out to plow the snow in the city of Oshkosh, George Oakes had the courage to go at night with the drivers when he plowed the streets. That's the type of person he was. He was so down to earth. You know, the fact that he was mayor didn't go to his head like it would do some politicians, you know.
Right. Right.
And that's why he got elected, always got elected in a Catholic ward. It was a Democratic ward to begin with. George was a Lutheran person, and despite the animosities between the Catholics and the Lutherans in the city of Oshkosh back in the 20s and the 30s, that didn't make a difference to George Oakes. He was a fair-minded guy.
Okay.
I've interviewed him personally myself when he was still alive, but he, in my estimation, he was one of the best mayors the city of Oshkosh ever had.
And when did he pass away?
I don't remember. I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up the 6th Ward. Thanks for all the info there. We're going to move on. We're talking about World War II.
Yep.
You were a participant in World War II. What year did you enlist, Inky, and why did you do that?
Now, the reason I joined the Wisconsin National Guard on June 24th, 1940. Now, the story behind that is very interesting. I had a job. I had graduated from Oshkosh High School in June of 1938. All during high school, from the sophomore on, I had a part-time job where I was working for a tailor. I would clean the tailor shop in the morning before school. Then after school, I would go back to the tailor shop and I would deliver the clothes to the customers on a bicycle. My pay was $2 a week. And that meant, I was putting in about 40 hours a week because I worked all day Saturday. I'd clean the shop in the morning, go to school. Then after school, I would deliver the clothes. Sometimes I got home from delivering clothes. I would first get home maybe at 6 o'clock in the evening after school, 2 or 3 hours delivering clothes with a bike. And $8 a month was a lot of money in the 1935, 1936, 37, 38, 39, 40. In 1940, I was still making, the unemployment rate was still about 75% in the city of Oshkosh. You couldn't buy a job. My dad worked at Payne Lumber Company. Sometimes he'd bring home maybe $3, $4 a week. My $2 a week, I would use that, give some to my mother, some I would pay for my clothes or my living expenses, and I'd give my brother and sister some spending money because my dad couldn't afford to do it. And here, it's strange as it seems, it's a coincidence. In June 24th, 1940, which was on a Monday, it's in the evening, and we're sitting up. We had a lot of the homes in the Sixth Ward had porches out, porches not enclosed. They were open porches. And my house on 6th Street had an open porch. And it happened to be a gathering place of young men like myself in the summertime just to shoot the bull and horse around and play around. On June 24th, 1940, it's around 7 o'clock in the evening, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. We're horsing around in my porch, and we're talking about each other how to make money. At the time, one of the only ways we could make extra money was to go frogging. I don't know if the people in Oshkosh know what the frogging was. In the area around Oshkosh, there was a lot of swamps. It was filled full of frogs, different types of fish. There was a lot of grasshoppers and things like that. Now, there were three businesses in Oshkosh that bought specimens of insects, frogs, fish, etc., to furnish the biology labs of colleges. So us young kids, what we could call frogging. Now the frogging population in the area around Oshkosh was enormous because of the big, the large swamps that we had around Oshkosh and the water. Back in the 1930s, insects like grasshoppers and all kinds, and these frogging industries in Oshkosh, Steinhelber's and Lemberger's was one of them, and Neubauer's was another one. They would buy the insects or the frogs and other animals from you, and you could get a bunch of frogs for maybe 15, 20 cents. Now 15, 20 cents today, you won't even buy a postage stamp. But in those days, could buy you maybe a pound of wieners. So that's what the kids did. And we're talking about this, how we could make some money. And somehow somebody mentioned in the crowd, in the gang on my porch, that the National Guard in Oshkosh was looking for people to fill their ranks. Unbeknownst to us kids, even though the war in Europe was started in 1939 in Britain fighting Nazi Germany, us kids didn't think about the war because President Roosevelt originally, when he got reelected in 38, had promised that American people will never get involved in the war in Europe. So joining the National Guard and the fear of going into war was a farthest thing from our minds. And getting back to the gang on the porch, they said the National Guard is looking for volunteers, and the pay would be $1 a night, once a week that you drilled. You drilled 52 weeks out of the year, and you got $1 a night. And I'm adding to myself, I'm making $2 a week, and if I can make $1 a night extra, that's $3 a night, and $3 a week during World War II, in a sense, matched the salary that some of these lumber workers were making in a week.
Right.
At the thing, that was a lot of money back in the 1930, even in 1930 and 1940, that was a lot of money. So to my Why I did it, I do not know. But as the guys are talking about the National Guard paying $1 a night, I thought to myself, and another buddy of mine, Larry Marine, he was a neighbor of mine, we decided to go down to the National Guard, which was drilling that Monday night. And we rode our bikes down to the National Guard Armory, which is on the corner of Merritt and Jefferson Street. And we peeked inside the armory, and then some of the men inside that were drilling had part of the National Guard. Now to go back, the National Guard had 2 units. They had Company H, was a heavy weapons company. They worked on 30 caliber machine guns and 50 caliber machine guns. And then they had the service company, which consisted of the band and the headquarters for the 127th Infantry Regiment, which was part of the 32nd Infantry Division, or the Red Arrow Division, that had fought in World War I. And the 32nd Infantry Division had a strong reputation. And I and my buddy stopped in the National Guard to look around to see what the deal was with the National Guard. And of course, seeing a couple strangers walk in, I assumed that some of the National Guard people asked what we were doing there. And we told them that we heard that you're enlisting. Mm-hmm. And they invited us in. And why Larry and I did it, I will never know, but we decided to sign up that night.
Okay, well, hold that thought, Inky. We've got to take a break, but when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. You wrote a book. We're going to show a picture of the book that you wrote. So hang tight. We'll be back right after this.
The simple pleasures in life are going on all around us. But inches beneath the surface, utility lines are carrying electricity, gas, and more to your home. Digger's Hotline helps avoid costly or dangerous mistakes. It doesn't matter how deep you're digging. Call 811 or click diggershotline.com 3 working days before you start your project, and we'll help take the risk out of digging. Protect your simple pleasures. Know what's below.
There is a place where history is captured in time, where the voices of past generations still discuss the days of success, of love, hope, and joy. Timeless, playful,
welcome to my attic,
memorable. The Oshkosh Public Museum. Come for the sights, stay for the memories.
Welcome back to Oshkosh Diaries. We're sitting down talking to Clarence Inky Jungwirth. He's in the middle of talking about his enlistment in World War II. He did write a book, Ian, if you want to put that up on the screen, about his exploits in World War II. Thankfully, he did serve and join. So, Inky, I rudely interrupted you there. We had a break, but why don't you go ahead and continue on with your story?
And when I got home from the Army that night about 9 o'clock. My mother and dad were in bed sleeping, and I was going to be 21 in October of that year of 1940. And I was 20 when I signed up legally. You had to be 21 to have your parents' you had to have your parents' permission to join the National Guard. But I had signed a paper on the condition that I get my parents' permission. So I woke my mother up. I said, Ma, guess what? I joined the National Guard. And she started to cry. She said, why did you do that? I didn't realize at the time, it was only later, that my dad had been drafted in World War I. My mother and dad had got married in 1917. And my dad had been drafted into the Army in 1918. And he was sent down south to be trained, but he never got involved in World War One. He never sent overseas. But that bothered my mother that I was joining the Army, because she knew about the World War One, because some of our neighbors had been in World War One, and one of the neighbors in particular that lived near us had suffered a gas attack over in France, and he was a very sick man. In fact, I don't think he ever worked after World War One because of the gas that was in his lungs. And I think my mother and dad knew that. And I told my mother, I said, I joined the Guards, but I got to have your permission to do it. And she said, we'll talk about it in the morning. And my dad was unemployed at the time. And in the morning, I asked him if he would sign the papers, and my mother signed the papers. And my mother and dad reluctantly signed the papers that I could take it to the National Guard and be officially inducted into the National Guard. In retrospect, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, joining the National Guard.
Right.
And that's a whole story. I don't know if we got time to talk about it.
Well, I think Derek's got a question for you.
You mentioned some of your buddies and you were talking about this, how to make the money and going down there with you. So was there a group of you that did end up joining together?
No, there was just, my best friend already had been in the Guard because he was 1 or 2 years older than I.
Okay.
His name was Andy Castle, which pictures in the book.
Yeah.
Andy Castle and I were friends. And at the time, I didn't realize, I think at the time, that Andy was part of the National Guard because I just never paid attention to it, you know. And when I got down to the National Guard started getting guys from Berlin, Ripon, Armour, all over, because it was an easy way to make a buck at the time in 1940. When the National Guard and the Service Company and H Company officially started asking for people to join, you know, there was an awful lot of unemployed young men, 19, 20 years old. And a lot of guys that joined the National Guard in 1940 were only 18, 19, 17 years old. They got their parents to sign the authorization. They lied to get in because they were getting $1 a night, you know. $1 a week, that was a lot of money, you know. And a number of National Guardsmen in the 32nd Infantry Division eventually turned out to be only 17, 18, and 19 years old when they joined to do it. For me personally, that was the wisest decision I ever made, even though my parents disagreed, hated to see me join the Guard. The war wasn't, President Roosevelt had told the public that we would never get involved in the war in Europe. So that, for us young men, so I was just the thing. Plus, at the same time that we talked about joining the National Guard, they said that the National Guard, the 32nd Infantry Division, was going to Kentucky in August of that year for 2 weeks drill, or 3 weeks drill. 3 weeks drill for in Kentucky, that's $21. So we anticipated getting $21, which was a fortune in 1940 for us guys, 18, 19, 20. I'm going to be 21 October 5th, 1940. That was a lot of money. Here I'm only making $2 a week, and I make 21. So that was an incentive for a lot of people, the young men, to join the National Guard in 1940 to fill out what the National Guard units were, that thing. Now, the interesting part of me joining the National Guard, that I would be a machine gunner, work on 30 caliber machine guns, never thinking. But after a couple weeks of drill on a Monday night, each company had a company clerk that did the paperwork. Now, looking back at it, to be able to type was a skill that very few young men had. When I was a sophomore in high school, I took typing because I was planning on being a bookkeeper because I had taken bookkeeping in school, and I had typing skills. I took the typing for a semester at Oshkosh High School. Now keep in mind, for my generation, out of the sixth ward, to go to high school was highly unusual because most of us my age went to work already 15, 16, 17, 18 years old because nobody paid attention to the state laws regarding education at the time. So a lot of the guy I replaced at the tailor shop was 16 years old, and he was already working at Badger Lumber Company. And he had been working for the tailor, and he said, "Inky, you want to take the job?" And that's how I got the job, because he had a better job at Badger Lumber Company, and I was glad to take the job to do it that way.
Right.
And the typing that I took as a sophomore in high school saved my life. That's a long story. It so happened that the clerk, when I had been there a couple of weeks, and the clerk that was at Company H decided that he didn't want the job anymore. He wanted to go on to be on the line, to be a machine gunner, things like that. So the captain asked, Captain Zabel was his name, Milton Zabel. He was an electrician in Oshkosh. He asked if anybody could type, and I raised my hand. And he took me into his office. He said, "Do you want the company clerk job?" I said, "Yeah." He asked me if I could type, and I was a skilled typist. It's just a gift I had that I could be able to type good. I typed good. Now, I hadn't typed, I'm going to be 21. I hadn't typed since I left sophomore year in school. But somehow I had retained the typing skills, and it was a matter of a week or two that I got those skills back, even though I hadn't typed a thing. And I became the company clerk of Company H.
Okay. Well, you were a company clerk, but you found yourself in some battles during World War II. You were in Buna, Luzon, and the Philippines.
Yep. See, what the American people don't realize, even though you were, at that time, if you were in headquarters or you were a clerk, you were sometimes, now I got to backtrack. I was company clerk from 1940 until 1941. It so happened, now I got to backtrack. The company commander of Company H, when we went to summer camp in 1940, in August of 1940, somehow he was testing me. He would pressure me. He would criticize me and everything. And I remember at summer camp, we went, instead of going to Kentucky, we went to Camp Douglas in Wisconsin, near in southwestern Wisconsin. When we were in summer camp, the captain of the company, he was on my back. Why he criticized me, sometimes I'd sit at the typewriter and I would cry, because of the criticism of me. And we were 3 weeks at camp, and he was on my back for 3 weeks. And I couldn't understand why. Me being a young kid, new to the company and all that, I was going to talk to the captain of the company, thing. When we got back from camp in August of 1940, we've been advised that we're going to be, President Roosevelt had instructed the National Guard divisions to become part of the regular Army starting October 15th, 1940. When I got back to camp in August of 1940, Captain Zabel called me into the office, and he shook my hand, and he praised me for the fine work I did. I almost dropped through the floor of the Army because I expected criticism. Here he was congratulating me. What he was doing, he was testing me to see if I could take the pressure, because a company clerk's job was I would say, 12 or 14-hour day job, which I didn't realize at the time. And like I said, I almost flew through the floor. The company, I was a private. You're a private when you start in the National Guard. And when we knew we were going to be inducted into the regular Army in October 15, 1940, my job rated a corporal's rating. So what he did in September of 1940, now here is a fantastic story. When I found out that we were going to be inducted in 1940, October 15, 1940, in September 1st, Captain Zabel got orders to update the records of the National Guard unit of the H Company. You had to make out a record of each soldier had a serial number. You had to make out a record of his dependents, or his if he got killed, who your beneficiary would be. Mm-hmm. And the records at the National Guard were in bad shape. So what he did, he said, Clarence, he says, we have to fill out all the records. There would have been I think there were maybe, I'm making a guess, but might be about 120 of us. So I had to fill out all those service records for 120 people, and all the other things that the military was requiring before we got October 15, 1940. So I quit my job September 1st at the tailor shop, and I worked the whole month of September for nothing at the National Guard Armory, typing up all the service records and all that. I didn't realize at the time that that was the biggest gamble I ever took in my life. Later I realized it. Because when you got inducted into the National Guard, when you went and joined the National Guard, you had to take a physical exam by a local doctor to see if you were fit. In other words, your eyesight was 20/20, mm-hmm. Whether you had flat feet or any physical characteristics that would deter you from becoming a National Guardsman. The physician that operated, that tested us was, I don't want to mention his name, but he was an alcoholic. And if the body was warm, he would pass it. I think he got $1 for everybody he passed. Mm. You're talking $1 was a lot of money in 1940. It was a cursory exam. We passed. But on October 15th, when we were inducted into the National Guard, we had to swear that we were part of the regular Army. But before we left, which was going to be October 20th, we had to have regular Army doctors come in to give us a real exam. So he's examining us in the Army. They're checking us, all the National Guardsmen from Company H, for example, and they did a thorough examination of it. I had finished all the exam, the eyesight, and they test the heart and see if you had all the different things they go through. And he was almost done, and then you had to strip, you were stripped naked. And then you had to stand on a platform, and he examined your body if there was any defects or anything like that. And the doctor was done with me, and then he stopped me. He says, you got some veins in your leg, varicose veins in your leg. I thought, what's a varicose vein? Mm-hmm. I never knew it. And he said, do they bother you? I didn't even know what a varicose vein was. I said, I don't know what they are. I said, they haven't bothered me. I'm a walker. in summer camp, I did a lot of walking, and things like that, and drilling. And I pleaded with them. I said, they haven't bothered me. But keep in mind, the United States wasn't at war yet. So I pleaded with them. I said, they don't bother me. And I wasn't lying. I was telling the truth. They didn't bother me. But I didn't have flat feet, which would be a reason for you not being accepted in a regular army. But the varicose veins could keep me out from the walking. And I told him they never bother me. And he believed me. And he passed me.
Okay.
It was the happiest day of my life.
Well, Inky, in a little bit here, we're going to take a break. I'm going to throw a curveball in the director's box there. I want to, if you can throw up the Bronze Star plaque, Ian. As I had mentioned before, Inky was in a lot of battles in the war, and he did receive a Bronze Star. There it is up on the screen. I said at the first show that the guy's a hero, and anyone that gets a Bronze Star and serves in the military and is in battle like that, certainly in my opinion, I hope in yours, the person is a hero. So with that, Inky, we're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to shift some gears.
Yep.
Kind of almost literally. We're going to start talking about Oshkosh Corporation. So
Yeah.
Stay tuned, and we'll be right back talking about the Oshkosh Corp. Thanks.
And the funniest thing happened.
On the surface, the simple pleasures in life are going on all around us. But inches beneath the surface, utility lines are carrying electricity, gas, and more to your home. Digger's Hotline helps avoid costly or dangerous mistakes. It doesn't matter how deep you're digging. Call 811 or click diggershotline.com 3 working days before you start your project, and we'll help take the risk out of digging. Protect your simple pleasures. Know what's below.
There is a place where history is captured in time, where the voices of past generations still discuss the days of success, of love, hope, and joy. Timeless, playful,
Welcome to my attic.
memorable. The Oshkosh Public Museum. Come for the sights, stay for the memories.
Hello and welcome back to Oshkosh Diaries. We're talking with Inky Jungwirth, a wealth of knowledge about the city of Oshkosh, hero in the military. One thing that Inky is very proud of is his time at the Oshkosh Corporation, or better known as Oshkosh Truck, and many, many years ago, four-wheel drive. So we're going to shift a little gears now, Inky, and we're going to talk about Oshkosh Corp. Why don't you just give us a rundown of the beginnings of the company?
At the beginning, the company started in 1917 in Clintonville, Wisconsin. V.A. Mosley, who was a founder of Oshkosh Corporation, was a merchandiser in Clintonville. He ran a merchandise shop. They sold coffins up there, and his wife would sew the lining of the coffins, and he was a merchandiser in Clintonville. And he had enough money that he had a mechanic called, I'd have to look in my book.
Yeah. Why don't you just...
Yeah. He had a mechanic up at the thing that was a skilled mechanic that had an idea for a four-wheel drive truck. You have to keep in mind that the FWD in Clintonville, Wisconsin, which is still in existence today, had developed a truck for hauling soil, rocks, grudge. And Clintonville had been started, in fact, I believe in 1915. In fact, from my investigations, some of the trucks that the FWD had made out in Clintonville were eventually used by the U.S. Army in France during World War I.
Okay.
And in 1917, when the United States entered the war in Europe, some of those trucks from FWD went over to France. they used were first motorized vehicles. B.A. Mosley, and the mechanic he knew up in Clintonville, had an idea for developing a four-wheel drive vehicle. All the vehicles up until that time that were built in the United States were only rear-wheel drive because they didn't have the means of driving the front axle. But this mechanic that he had an idea where they could make a four-wheel drive so the front axle drove and the rear axle drove also, which gave you a lot of power, which gave you more hauling. You could haul bigger loads. It just was a better truck. In 1920, there was only 200 miles of paved roads in the United States, and that was out east. The rest were county roads. And if you go back to in the early part of the 20th century, these country roads are nothing but mud.
Sure.
The muds. In fact, in 1920, also, General Eisenhower was ordered to take a convoy from the East Coast to San Francisco. I think, if I remember correctly, it took them about 2 to 3 months to go from the East Coast to San Francisco. If it wouldn't have been for the farmers along the country roads out west hauling the trucks out of the mud, they would have never made it. They probably wouldn't have made it. I think they left in the summertime and got there, I believe it was in September. I could be wrong, but it took about 2 or 3 months to go from the West Coast, from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Quite the journey. Inky, what can you tell us about the WT-2206 story? What's the story on that?
Can I bring it up?
Got a
The
picture
other
of
one.
it. Oh,
The other book. I want to show the people a picture of this book. This book is the story of the WT-2206. It was written by a friend of mine up in Sault Ste. Marie, and he's given me a number of copies that I can sell.
yep, there we go. And I think
His name is Jim Menard. Without the WT-2206, there would be no Oshkosh truck. During the Cold War, on the SAC bases up in Upper Michigan in the 1950s, when the Russians were threatening the United States during the Cold War, the B-52 bombers that were stationed up in Michigan, Maine, up in Alaska, had a 2-mile runway they had to have to take off with the atomic bomb in them. The snowfall in Upper Michigan sometimes would be 200 or 300 inches in a year in the wintertime. People think the snow is bad now. They should go back into the 50s and 40s where they had thing. And what had happened that the B-52 bombers had to take off in 7 minutes. And they would fly over the North Pole to drop the atomic bomb on Russia. If the war started, if the Russians attacked the United States. With the depth of the snow on the airfields in the northern part of the United States, Montana, the Dakotas, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, where the air base was getting it would take the snow plows at the time maybe 20, 25 minutes to plow a 2-mile long runway. Can you imagine the snow that you get? And they didn't have the equipment back in the 50s like they have today. So what had happened, the United States, Oshkosh Corporation and under B.A. Mosley and John Mosley, which was his son, were running the company. John Mosley was head of the sales department. The sales department decided to go to the Pentagon. They said, you give us an order for 5 trucks. We'll build you a 54,000 GVW snowplow truck. The GVW stands for the gross vehicle weight that could be hauled by that truck. It's a very powerful truck because we had developed the 4-wheel drive by that time, the front axles, and the 54,000 GVW vehicle was a powerful vehicle. It had big engines, big transmissions, big transfer cases, very powerful things. And the Oshkosh truck, the engineering department, the cooperation was magnificent. B.A. Mosley and Mr. Sarbo, who was the chief engineer of Oshkosh Truck, were like twin brothers. Even though he was just a chief engineer, just an employee, they got along great together. And John Mosing also. They decided to build the 5 trucks. They went ahead and made the drawings of everything that were going into that trucks, gambling that the Pentagon would consider their bid. The fact that they had the drawings in their hand when they went to the Pentagon in the 1950s, and we had a competitor out east that went to the meeting at the same time Oshkosh Truck did. The Oshkosh Truck, when they went to the Pentagon meeting, we had all the drawings already designed. The truck was already designed. We had gone to Watertown, New York, to Seacard, which was a rotary snowplow manufacturer, a heavy-duty snowplow manufacturer. They had cooperated with Oshkosh Truck. They gave us their drawing of a heavy-duty rotary snowplow they would put on the truck. Frink Snowplow out of New York, also a plow manufacturer, had given us drawings of the snowplow they would put on that truck. So when our sales department went up to Pentagon, and we had to sit at the meeting, the Pentagon sat down with Oshkosh Truck and our competitor. Oshkosh Truck laid out all the drawings, and our competitor didn't have nothing.
Right.
So that clinched it.
Right.
Now that's only part of the story. We had to test the 5 trucks up in Michigan, in Sawyer Air Force Base in northern Michigan, which was a B-52 base. It cleared. We tested those trucks up there, and the military specified very tight specifications how many minutes that 2-mile runway had to be cleared. Oshkosh Truck went up there and tested the vehicle. It had to be good. The equipment on the vehicle had to be good for minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit, because they're going to be operating out of Alaska.
Yeah.
They went up there and up in Sawyer Air Force Base in Michigan and tested them. We passed the test with flying colors. We cleared those runways in record time so the B-52 bombers could take off.
Right. Well, Inky, you supplied a couple pictures, and I'm going to just tell my director that we're going to jump ahead in the script here a little bit. A couple pictures that you supplied to us, and we'll wait a second until those get up there, but I just wanted to make sure that we got to those. One was with the Secretary of Defense.
Right.
And what was that? What's that picture all about?
Secretary of Defense Gates,
There it is there.
right there. He came to Oshkosh, I believe that's 2000,
9 or 10.
2009, because the Oshkosh Truck had signed a contract for some military vehicles to be used over in Afghanistan and Iraq.
FMTV, I believe.
FMTV, right. And he came to Oshkosh Truck to inspect the factory. And Oshkosh Truck arranged for me, being a veteran of World War II,
Yeah.
and being a long-term, I was in 2009, I had retired in 1987, and of course, I mentioned before, I started back in 1988, and I'm being a long-term employee, and they wanted to meet Secretary Gates, so they had me meet Secretary Gates personally. They sent me so I could talk to him in person, and he pressed the metal on my hand. It's called, in the Defense Department, generals and that have a coin from the military department that's got a commemorative. It's a commemorative coin.
Right.
And Gates shook my hand, and when I took my hand away, the coin was in my hand, and it's on that thing.
Oh, okay.
And he being Defense Secretary, and that was quite an honor for me.
Oh, absolutely.
If you notice on the picture, I'm wearing the same thing I got on today.
Let's get the next picture up, Ian, if you could do that for me, please. You're next to a very large truck.
I became an expert at designing trucks in the shortest period of time. Now, I'm not bragging. I don't mean to brag. It may sound like bragging. But God gave me a gift that I could design the trucks, even though I don't have an engineering degree. By osmosis, I had picked up engineering qualifications that truck takes the water. And they always gave me the biggest. They gave me the biggest trucks to build, and that truck you're seeing on that picture is called the J Series. That's the biggest truck. The height from cab to the ground is 14 feet. The width is about 12 feet, and it cannot be used on U.S. highways because the limit on U.S. highways is 8 feet, and that's free. They have vehicles for use in oil fields.
Okay.
What they would do, they would mount drilling equipment on it for drilling oil wells, servicing oil wells, etc. Massive equipment, big Caterpillar tractors they could put on them.
What kind of engine does that thing have in it there?
That's got a. I got to stop and think.
Cummins, maybe?
No, it was a Caterpillar.
Caterpillar.
A Caterpillar,
Okay.
Caterpillar engine, a big, massive. I'd have to look in the book.
Yeah.
How
How many horsepower would something like that put
Oh,
out?
probably about 300-400 horsepower.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, big, a big thing.
What year is that one there? About?
I would guess that's about. I got to refresh my memory. See, this is 1914. That was about in the 1970s.
70s maybe?
In the
Okay.
1970s, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We had become a producer of big vehicles for use in the oil field industry. We built a number of them. They were called the J Series.
Yeah.
They had, you can see on the picture that the tire is almost as big as I am. I was 5'4" at the time, and those tires are almost big. It was a massive thing.
Well, Inky, I hate to stop you. I mean, I'm serious. I'd love to sit here for another hour, but unfortunately, the clock is our enemy
That's
tonight.
right.
I gotta sign off here. But on behalf of myself, Derek, our crew, and I'm sure everyone watching, you are a legend in the city of Oshkosh. You are a hero for serving this community. I mean, for this country. And now looking back on it, these guys wanted 2 shows. We could do 4 or 5, I'm sure. And so with that, thank you very much
You're
for sitting down
welcome.
with us. We do have, thanks.
Thanks, good.
We do have a couple
Thank you.
announcements again.
Okay.
So
Good.
Derek, go ahead.
Just reminder to keep checking out our Facebook pages, 2 of them, the Oshkosh Diaries on Facebook. Again, we're uploading the videos on the Friday before they air, so you can kind of see it sometimes before you see it here. Still tune in. But anyway, we're going to be looking at doing some vignettes on there too, maybe little 5-minute segments showcasing some of the locations around town that are historic. So that's Oshkosh Diaries on Facebook. Also check out the Oshkosh Memories as well and keep posting away those photos and recollections. Okay, so Paul's got another announcement to make here.
Right, one last plug for the Antique Appraisal Show, Saturday, March 29th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Senior Center Annex Building. And the theme for this year is railroad, so stop by. Inky, most likely, probably, hopefully, if he's not there, I'm going to go to his house and pick him up and make sure he's
I'll
there.
be
So
I'll
with
be there.
that, thanks for watching another episode of Oshkosh Diaries, and hope you can tune in again next time. Thanks.